Sure.
Yeah, usually we talk about where we weed and what we weed at the beginning of the show. We are gonna light up a little Girl Scout cookie while I introduce our next guest. Our first guest. This is amazing. You know,
our guest.
I really wasn't. We've been into politics, progressive politics, for a while, and you know, we sort of gave it up. To be honest, after everything that happened,
beat it out of us.
You know, they did.
Beat it out of us.
They beat us out of us. We've been Democrats twice in our lives. Otherwise, we've been independents.
It was painful.
And it was painful. And I of course watch our good friend Ron Placone, and he had this. He's been talking to progressive candidates here in California, and I watch his show, and he had this great candidate on by the name of Pat Harris, and I asked a cannabis question, and it turns out he actually is using cannabis as one of his top issues on his platform here in California, challenging Dianne Feinstein.
Who's totally anti-cannabis.
Who is literally the last prohibitionist.
Super prohibitionist.
In California.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even the party is on board cannabis. The Democratic Party platform came out last weekend, and they endorsed cannabis, and they didn't endorse a candidate. But this next, our guest did get some of those delegate votes. So let me just do a quick introduction here. We are joined by Pat Harris. He's a progressive Democrat. He's running for U.S. Senate in California's June primary for, of course, the seat that's been held for 5 terms by corporate Democrat and, you know, as I said, the last prohibitionist when it comes to cannabis, Dianne Feinstein. And he's basically started out his campaign last year essentially self-funded with a second mortgage on his house. And now he's totally non-corporate. He's not getting any money from any corporations.
That's good.
Which
I
immediately,
like that.
You know, that's the new trend.
We like that.
We like that. And
not everybody's doing that.
Not everybody's doing that. That's absolutely right. And there are some people in this race that are doing that. And there are people across the country that have promised to do that in national races. So it's good to see. So he got in the race. Now he's getting money in from all individual contributions. $90 average donation. We're going to look forward to seeing his FEC filing, which for this first quarter. But that's basically what they're saying at the campaign. So that's good news. He's, of course, you know, all the progressive issues. Pat is on board. You can go to his website. Of course, is Pat Harris or PatHarrisForSenate.com, and all of the progressive issues are there. Universal health care, college. You know, living wage, criminal justice reform. He grew up in Arkansas, in a working class family, and got out of college, a law degree, became a public defender, and has worked as a public defender and a civil rights attorney for 23 years now in California. He did end up taking on some very high profile cases that, you know, a few people maybe not would have taken. And that's, of course, part of what we're all about here in America. So some noble stuff going on, and we'll get into that. And I just want to, of course, Pat lives in Studio City with his wonderful wife, Carol.
Pretty close.
A world-class jazz singer. We actually lived in Studio City at one point in our lives. So that's pretty cool. And I think I would like to welcome Pat Harris to the show.
Hi, Pat Harris.
Can you hear us? And are you demuted? Are you unmuted? Oh, wait, I can't. Oh, wait, he hasn't been able to hear me. I unmuted myself. He hasn't been hearing me. Pat, I just did an amazing introduction for you.
Oh.
And you missed the whole thing. And you missed the whole thing because I had you muted. But that's okay. Or I had me muted to you. But welcome to the show, Pat. You can hear that all those allocates earlier. I gave a rundown of who you are and what you're all about. But welcome to DC 420, the Week in Weed. Pat Harris, Democrat in California.
I appreciate that. I probably didn't need to hear it anyway. My ego's big enough as it is.
Well, you know, we talked about how you are all, you know, you're on board all of the progressive issues, right?
Right. Medicare for all and renewable energy and all the good stuff. All the good stuff. But really why you're here today is so that we can focus on cannabis.
That's essentially, you know, we talked to, that's really the topic that came up when you were on Ron Placone. That was of interest to me because of course kind of the show we do. So I asked that question about cannabis and your position, and it was really exciting to hear that you have basically made cannabis and the legalization of cannabis a very important issue in your campaign. And you know a lot about what's going on in California. So I want to talk about what you found in California with regards to cannabis and the business of cannabis. But Pat, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got hooked on cannabis, for lack of a better word. What brought you to the cannabis space as for medicinal reasons? I mean, what was your journey to cannabis, and why is it a big issue for you in this campaign?
Well, it is a big issue for me, and I tell you, partly because I guess as a progressive, I was always somebody who felt like the legalization of cannabis was a foregone conclusion. It was something we needed to do. But it wasn't something that was really personal to me. I've never been a big fan of smoke, and so I didn't smoke a lot of joints when I was in college or growing. So it just wasn't on my radar a whole lot. Like I said, I've always supported it because I think it's ridiculous that we're outlawing a plant to begin with. But it got very personal with me about 3 years ago. My best friend, the woman who actually introduced me to my wife, a woman named Mia. Mia contracted cancer, and for about a year, we did everything we could in terms of experimental drugs, taking her around. I would go over and I'd sit with her. She couldn't get out of bed. We'd just sit and watch television because she was very uncomfortable. It just was a very bad situation. About a month before her death, the doctors essentially said, we can't do anything else for you, but what we can do is prescribe medical cannabis. And so she started taking the cannabis, and it was an amazing transformation. In the last month of her life, I went over, I picked her up one day, I'll never forget. Now, this was a woman who couldn't get out of bed. And for the entire day, we drove, she lived in Las Vegas. We drove around. She wanted to go see the gardens at the Bellagio Hotel. She wanted to go to Red Rock Canyon. We went to a movie. We spent a good 8 to 10 hours out. We went to the grocery store and just had a tremendous day. And, 1 week later, she died. But it was an amazing thing because for that 1 month, it changed her entire life. Medical cannabis allowed her to actually have some semblance of a life before she died. That started me researching. It started me interested in the issue. And at that point, I took it more as a medical issue. My background, I don't know if you mentioned in the introduction, my background is a criminal defense and civil rights attorney. So I was very familiar with cannabis in the criminal justice system. That was something I was, I went to law school in Michigan. And when I graduated, I did have opportunities to go work for corporate law firms. But what I had grown up with, my mother was very much a believer that you have to give a voice to those who are less fortunate. That's how we were raised. So I decided not to go the corporate route, and I went to work. It was Nashville, Tennessee, actually, where I went to work in the public defender's office. What I saw there was the stories you've heard a million times, guys, the same type of stories. I was representing mostly minorities with no money, and invariably what you would have, I don't think I was on the job more than a week when I had a client who was actually he was a cook at a Mexican restaurant. He was an African-American gentleman. He left work, went outside his car, lit up a joint, got arrested in the parking lot, gave him a $10,000 bail, which the judge would not reduce. He sat in jail, and in Tennessee, there's no such thing as specific dates when you have to go to trial. So he sat in jail for about 6 months. He lost his job, obviously. He lost his apartment. And this was a guy who had a decent paying job and a decent life. He had a girlfriend. Wow. She took their kid and left. He lost everything over a joint. And that to me was so beyond ridiculous. But I wish I could say, wow, that was a real aberration. That was something that was unusual. That was a normal story, guys. That was something I'd see 2 or 3 times a week, that kind of story. And, so in the sense of the criminal justice system, I saw very early on how ridiculous this was.
We're really seeing that. Whoa, getting a little feedback. I don't know if it's maybe is your speaker on, Pat? Maybe it's getting a little feedback, but and I think our mic was off before. But folks, yes, I mean, of course, and this is the same thing that's going on now, Pat. I mean, it hasn't really changed much. with the level of who's getting arrested for this, and obviously we see that usage of the plant is similar across demographics, but you see people of color being hurt from it, from the get-go of the drug war. And even today, we're still seeing the disparity. There was an article this week in New York about how the 85% of the arrests, I think, in New York for marijuana are people of color. So there's an investigation.
I don't doubt that at all. I can tell you that as a public defender, it was, there were pot parties going on in Belmead, which is the rich part of Nashville. Young white men and women, they never got busted. No one ever bothered them at all. They would do pretty much what they want. If a police officer pulls someone over, a young white male or female, and found them with a joint, they were going to say, put that out and go home.
Right.
It just didn't work that way.
Yeah.
That in fact, I guess H.R. Haldeman pretty much spilled the beans about the Nixon administration, who blatantly said we essentially started cracking down on pot because it was the young black men and the hippies who we wanted off the streets.
Yeah.
And that's why we begin with, and the legacy has lived on.
Right.
So you're on board with the Marijuana Justice Act that's been introduced in both the House and the Senate. So if you were elected, we could count on you supporting those. Or now Bernie Sanders nobody's really co-sponsored. There's a lot of talk about this, Pat, this year because it's a very hot topic, and there's a lot of Democrats that are getting on board cannabis for not necessarily a lot of corporate Democrats. You have Cory Booker, you have Kamala Harris, and you have a lot of these progressives that are connected through corporate people that are on board cannabis now because it's a political issue. So just to sort of delve into that, it's not in your stump speech that I can find. Is it in your stump speech?
Definitely my stump speech.
Is it in your stump? Okay, so I guess I haven't. I was looking through some of the videos on your website, so I've been trying to find. I watched.
I can send you. Sometimes what happens is, depending on the group I speak to, sometimes they limit the amount of time you can speak.
Right.
If it's a shortened version, then I
hit the majors. Well, talk about some of the places that you're going to as a progressive in California to sort of why are you you're championing cannabis. Cello wants to know why there's no cannabis leaf on your bus. So I'll throw that out there.
Do something on the bus, something visual. Own it. I mean, this is the year.
You need to come on the bus because we actually have a garden now on the bus, a little garden on there, and there's a cannabis plant in the garden.
Nice.
So
but get some visual stuff on the bus, because I do think this is the year for cannabis, and not to shy away from it.
Absolutely.
Really be proud, be bold about it. It is legal. I wear cannabis gear all over the place, and
it's your camera.
I don't know. Some friends are like, why do you do that? Why do you why do you put it in people's faces like that? Because I think it's important to normalize the idea that regular folks use cannabis. I use cannabis medicinally for many, many years. I used it recreationally in college. My parents actually introduced it to me when I was in college. But lots of people use cannabis, and I think that it's important to let it shine. Let it out. Come out of the cannabis closet.
I mean, I think you hit the right word for the introduction of cannabis nationwide. You hit the word normalcy. Normalizing it. I think that's the biggest single issue we still face, because even with progressives, and I have to admit myself, even like I said a few years ago, the issue or the vision of still a huge part of the public. If you're over 60, your vision is still Reefer Madness.
Yeah.
You still remember the movie. If you're under 60 or whatever, you still probably think of cannabis as being two guys in the basement of their parents' home smoking a joint.
Right.
And that's the image that people immediately get when they talk cannabis. Further from the truth. And not only do normal people engage in eating or smoking or whatever with cannabis, not only is it normal people, but you're talking about a population that needs it. I mean, we have
Oh,
a
yeah.
plant here that has the ability to actually do so much good for so many people,
So many.
and yet we're criminalizing it. And it's when you learn about it and you put it in that context, that here we have something that is a plant. I mean, let's say tomorrow, let's say we decide vitamin C. We're going to criminalize vitamin C. So now you can't, whatever. That's how silly this is. We have a plant that actually provides good for people and does amazing things, and yet we are trying to make it as if it shouldn't be a normal part of our daily lives, and it should be. Because, and I honestly believe this, in 20, 25 years, cannabis is going to be very similar to aspirin or Advil or anything that we take today.
Oh, absolutely.
For sure. It is already in Israel. In 27 nursing homes in Israel, everybody's getting it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. My mom, who has dementia, she's in the end stages of Alzheimer's disease. It's the only medicine that actually benefits her, and it's illegal for her to have it because she's in a nursing home that gets federal funds. So to me, the most important thing is to get it off the Schedule 1 of drugs. And I want to know what do you think is the best way to get our elected officials on board with getting it off the Schedule 1 of drugs so that people in nursing homes can get it?
Well, I think the problem you've got with elected officials right now, and I know we haven't gotten into this yet, but the problem you're going to see with elected officials as cannabis becomes more and more mainstream, where it's going. It's going with the drug companies. You're going to see pharma get involved. You're going to see them start trying to actually monopolize the industry. It's already starting. And you're going to see them start trying it, and then into candidates' campaigns, and basically they're going to turn it into, or try to turn it into, pretty much what they've turned every form drug into in this country.
Well, is there a way to avoid that? I mean, I know
Yes.
you're a really big proponent of this green rush, and there's a lot of negative side effects to what's going on in Denver. We're seeing actually, housing prices are not going down. They're getting a lot of people coming to Colorado because of the legal cannabis industry. They don't have enough housing. We're probably going to see that here in California a lot,
Where we already don't have enough housing.
right? And then, of course, now taxation. One of the issues with taxation, Berkeley is lowering its city tax because it sees people being driven to the black market. Whereas California, it sounds like, is looking to add another 15% excise tax on it.
It's so ridiculous, and that's got to be the first thing we deal with, guys. I mean, we've got to deal with this issue of taxation, because what's happening is we're driving out small business. We're driving out people who should be profiting from this, because we're making the same mistake. But Washington State corrected it. Has, to a certain degree, at least, not totally, but to a certain degree, they've corrected it, because they realized very early on, they started off with these high tax rates,
right?
And the result was they were driving these people underground or out of business.
Yeah.
Same thing in California. We're repeating the same mistake because we're getting greedy. We're seeing this tax dollars, we're seeing the possibilities, and we're getting greedy on it, and we're going to kill the golden goose here because we are absolutely too greedy about it.
Yeah.
This is the number one issue, I believe, going forward in terms of what we have to deal with the cannabis industry. We have to get the taxes back in line, because we cannot drive small business out of this. We cannot allow the growers who've been in this all their lives to suddenly either go underground or go bankrupt. It's not right. It's not morally right. It's not economically smart. And what we're going to end up with is Pfizer running the cannabis industry, and you know what the result of that's going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's heading there. I mean, this is with this transition from a completely black market to something that's legal in these states, but illegal federally still. And still, I mean, even locally, like San Bernardino, the sheriffs hate this stuff. And I want you to talk a little bit about Adelanto. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but you have a story about how you talked to some folks. Now they've got their problems too.
Oh yeah, another gangster
with a
gangster
little bribery charges at the mayor pro tem. So. And there's been other issues across this space with people, greasing their palm a little bit, and the feds like to go in there and set people up for all kinds of things. And this is some of the stuff that they're doing. But if you read some of the press that's coming out of this little city, this little town of Adelanto, they are looking pretty good as far as their budget goes, and they are attributing it all to this cannabis industry that is got them out of a hole, and is now pulling their deficit back because of a prepayment plan that they did with the cannabis industry there, and they're basically saying that the cannabis industry is what's digging them out of the hole without really saying it. So, go talk about your experience with that little town and what you saw out there as the Silicon Valley of cannabis, which quite frankly is scary. Silicon Valley is their home housing is ridiculous in Silicon Valley. But talk about your experience with a little town. I mean, look at Mike Tyson. What is it? Nipton? You ever been to Nipton yet? That's going to be a complete cannabis town. Talk about your experience in the green business here in California.
Well, I got to tell you, Adelanto is unique of anywhere in California. They decided very early on that cannabis had the potential to be an economic boom. This was a very, very poor town out in San Bernardino County. They'd always run in deficits. They'd always had problems. They had, you could hear some of the stories about the things they had to do just to be able to keep the city running. The mayor came in. He's an ex-Vietnam vet. Very interesting guy. The guy you would think would be sort of a Republican, tough on crime, that kind of guy. He recognized very early on that the potential with cannabis was enormous. He, as you said, he kind of started the slogan, we're going to become the Silicon Valley of weed. And he backed it up. And he put together a coalition of some real estate developers to build an industrial park where they are selling to processing plants for cannabis. At very, some of these rates are pretty high that these cannabis producers are paying, but very low. The thing he's done is he has kept the city taxes. He's cut them almost in the 2/3 of what most cities are charging. So it becomes very attractive to the cannabis industry.
Well, that's fascinating. They basically they've jumped on board to lower the taxes.
Yes,
also
absolutely.
to attract more business, and the side effect being that it's helping people. I don't know. I don't think they dispense. Did they dispense out there, or they just grow?
No, they dispense.
They do. So
they have 4 dispensaries
in about a square mile, right?
That's about a square mile. That's about right. Yeah.
Well, the whole town of Nipton is going to be a destination, and then that's fascinating that they lowered the taxes to draw them in. They gave them that early tax payment option, which apparently enough people took the opportunity and dug themselves out of a hole. As far as the budget goes, within the last year, they had been seeing real problems with their budget for since 2009. They were in a hole. So
they were running in the red for years, and now they're running in the black for the first time in a decade. Well, they give it to the cannabis industry. I mean, they
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, I think you're going to see some of these towns that are rejecting it. They're going to see this money coming in. Hopefully, the towns will realize that being greedy is not the way to go, and that there's going to be enough for everybody. If you want to have both the benefit of the taxes as well as the benefit of lowering, the draw to the black market, because the black market doesn't seem to be stopping. You're hearing you're hearing the news every week about these giant busts. There's just one in a Denver suburb, 1,400 plants in a house. You hear it all the time out of Colorado. We have problems in our national forests up in Northern California with illegal grows. And it's not just cartel. It's a lot of some of these guys in Oregon lost their license because they're moving stuff to other states. So I think the taxation, I that's good to hear, and hopefully the towns that do get on board will get it together. Los Angeles, I think it's 2.5%, and I hope California doesn't do what they're rumoring to be doing and adding another excise tax on top of this.
They're talking
because we're already going 40 to 60%, depending on what community you're in. That's what they did to tobacco. So I get it. I understand the draw, but they also stopped the illegal tobacco trade.
Well, they
Well,
also too. Tobacco didn't have the small growers, and for very few of them, tobacco was always a large corporate industry, and so they could afford it. There's too many small businesses in the cannabis industry. They're going to get driven out if we don't do something absolutely, and we need to do it soon, because we're going to end up losing a lot of these people, these growers, producers. We're going to end up losing a lot of them if we don't do something fast. And it's not going to be it's not going to be what we want. It's going to be the opposite of what California expected.
Yeah.
Well, we got to be honest. To be honest, we weren't supporters of Prop 64.
We didn't vote for Prop 64 because we were worried that the small producers would get screwed.
It's funny you say that. I wondered about that. I wondered if a lot of people in the industry actually opposed it. That's interesting to hear you say that.
Oh yeah.
Our two grower friends totally opposed it.
Yeah, Prop 64 was a giant corporate cannabis takeover.
Yeah.
And it's, hopefully we'll be able to get all these proposed rules, because everything's temporary. These are all temporary rules as it gets worked out. And one state after the next, sort of they look at the other state and then they adjust their rules. And I mean, tracking is a mess in some of these other states. Colorado seems to have it down, but I mean, we don't even have a tracking system at this point. It's all ledgers and by hand and the
a notebook.
Honest Engine right now, because there is no tracking system in place, and they wanted to go live and they wanted to get up because we got legal weed in California.
They
we want to get this going.
Yeah.
So but it's great. I think it's here now. Our big issue with Prop 64 is the patients getting swept up in this, or rather, or being
the medical patients
being run
getting
over in
screwed.
this. Prop 64 promised that the patients would be taken care of, and they've been now in the subsequent Marcosa monster that they created. It's an issue, and it costs $100 to get your state ID, so you don't have to pay that extra tax. I guess if you have cancer, that's okay, but access is an issue as well. So how do we balance the medical versus the recreational end to make sure that patients don't get left behind in this? What are your ideas on that?
No, and you're right. I mean, we need to change the law immediately in terms of we've got to amend it, because what we're dealing with right now is we've got these compassionate caregivers who, for years, I mean, since Prop 215, really, I mean, really back since the 1990s, who have gone in and just done, I mean, amazing work, providing cannabis to patients, providing cannabis to people who are having serious medical issues for free. And now, because of the way the Prop 64 is set up and the way the law is set up, essentially they have to now pay taxes on they were getting the marijuana, they were getting it free from a lot of growers, mostly up in Humboldt and those areas around there. They were free, and so they were able to provide it to the AIDS patients, those type of people. And what you're seeing now is both parties are having to pay taxes on what is essentially a freebie, and they aren't making any money off of this. So now, what are they in? They're forced to go out of business. So you're talking about huge numbers. I mean, I know, I think 2 months ago, it seemed like I'd read there was up to 12. This was right at the beginning of when it was legalized. Already 12 businesses, 12 of these nonprofits just shut the doors. So we can't go forward. We're not going to be able to do this.
Can't compete.
So we're talking about medical patients who rely years of their lives, and they're out of luck. I mean, it's just an amazing thing. We have to go in and amend that law. We have to be able to make it clear that these compassionate caregivers are not taxed, period. That ought to be something that is done within the next 30 days, because this is driving people away from literally saving lives and helping people.
That
ought to be first.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. It's some type of you are getting away from one tax if you pay that fee, but you still got the growing end, they're taxed. So that's basically, you can't grow it. You literally cannot grow it for free because you're going to get taxed on whatever comes out of your ground.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, to amend that, I think is a great idea. And of course, this is a fluid situation here in California. I think it's there's a 90-day window or a 145-day window. I'm not sure what the window is where it has to be finalized. And they continue to do, public commentary, training sessions on track and trace. So I'm hoping that, I agree with you. I think that's something that needs to be amended here in California. The Weed for Warriors project is somebody that I follow does that gets cannabis to veterans and has been. And they've been on top of keeping an eye on how this act this law in California has basically now taxed the patients out. And these collectives, I've been a member of a collective for a number of years, and there's no storefront. It's all they do is work with patients.
Yeah.
And they're like a formulating pharmacy and find the right mix and the right compounds and the right type of cannabinoids for what's going on. Because he saw that, that there was he admits that here in California, okay, it was a way to get legal pot. All right. But people needed it. Real people needed it. And so it filled both needs. We had decriminalized it in California. It was a fine for under an ounce. Patients had the collective system, which they were able to get their medicine without any problems, free or otherwise. Prop 64 is supposed to make it still free, that you can give an adult can give another adult an ounce of weed, right? So, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to get these patients and getting bulldozed over by this recreational movement was what we were all afraid of when Prop 64 was happening. And you're seeing it in New York too. You're seeing it in these other states, in New Jersey and these other states that have medical marijuana that are looking at recreational, and they're very worried that their patients are going to lose access. So maybe it's some final thoughts on making sure patients get the medicine they need.
I think the biggest issue is, again, it's awareness. I think that when people hear what's going on, especially if they hear a specific situation, if you hear a story about somebody who, for example, has suffered from AIDS and has had a nonprofit to come in and cannabis over the years, and it's helped them dramatically, it's helped them deal with the issues that they're taking with the cocktails. You hear the stories, specific ones. Even the most hard-hearted conservative looks at it and says, well, that needs to be something that should be provided. But we don't have an awareness. We don't have politicians talking about it because politicians basically don't see money in terms of, right now the drug companies aren't dealing with it. So, and I don't really want to take a lot of them say, I don't really want to take money from the cannabis community. Pfizer hasn't gotten into it yet. I'll take money from Pfizer, but they aren't into it yet. So a lot of these politicians don't see for them a reason to make it an issue.
The only time it does, and it's 201, I have to say, if you look a little deeper into these conservatives, it's a very libertarian thing to be on board, freedom of cannabis, or cannabis use. But every one of these guys have somebody connected, where it's a medical benefit. Now, we just had a lawsuit in New York that was dismissed. It was challenging cannabis under Schedule 1 as unconstitutional. There were a number of plaintiffs. I don't know if you're familiar with the case, but the judge dismissed it and said we need administrative and congressional action before taking judicial action. I was hopeful that we could come at it through the judiciary, and they're gonna appeal, of course. So, do you think that with these conservatives, we can find common ground with these guys on this, where we can take care of the banking issue, where we can take care of leaving states alone and getting Jeff Sessions off our back? What is is it an incremental strategy? Taking care of banking first. I know you want to be a rabble rouser, and we're all for that. We're all for that. But can you reach across the aisle on some of these issues with regards to cannabis?
This is the problem. I got to tell you, I don't think it's reaching across the aisle. I think you're going to find a lot of Republicans who are, as you said, libertarians. You have somebody like Dana Rohrabacher, who is one of the most Republican conservative congressmen from California, who is a large supporter of cannabis, the cannabis industry.
True
I
story.
think the real problem is in the Democratic Party.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
I'm running against Dianne Feinstein, who was quoted after it was passed as saying she's still against it because it's a gateway drug.
Right.
And we're still hearing that silliness from a Democrat.
Yeah.
Okay? And she's not the only Democrat. My other opponent that I'm running against as well, same thing. He's seen it in his Hispanic communities as a gateway drug.
Now I've understood he's on board legalization though. He's supporting.
He was a latecomer.
Right?
He was a latecomer to legalization.
He's jumping on board the cannabis.
He's only because it passed as Prop 64. He was really late to the party on cannabis. It's not like he's a big proponent. Doesn't sound like he's had any personal stories.
Right.
He only, I think, is doing it for political reasons. I'm glad to know that it's in your stump speech. Really, really embrace it. Put it on the bus somewhere.
Like put a bumper sticker. Put at least a bumper sticker on the bus.
Something visual.
So let me ask you this: where some of the folks are asking.
Tell you guys, whenever I mention stump speech, whenever I bring up cannabis, it's one of the biggest applause lines I get.
I'm telling you, 2018 is about cannabis.
Even in those conservative areas, because you're going to some place that, like, when your strategy is very interesting, and you've been obviously successful because you ended up on that ballot.
How'd you get on that ballot?
At the convention.
How'd you do that?
So now, what'd you do? I'm sorry.
I actually qualified. But they were going to keep me off of it. They didn't want me up there rabble rousing, and they decided to keep me off of it. And I said, well, I qualify for the ballot. I met your criteria. You can either change the decision, or I'll see you in the courthouse on Thursday morning.
What was the criteria? What was the criteria? Just I don't know. Was it just out of curiosity?
They had a number of criteria, but one of them was raising. You have to raise at least $250,000, and I have raised over that.
Right.
And that was the main criteria you have to meet, and I met it. So they basically tried to keep me off anyway, and like I said, I just told them.
But everybody had the opportunity to get on that ballot as long as they met whatever criteria they needed to meet.
There are other criteria as well you can get on the ballot for, yes.
Right. So
I do believe that
you did the work to do whatever it took.
Yeah, and I got to say that the Democratic establishment, the party establishment, is 10 steps behind the actual Democratic progressive movement.
Oh yeah.
They don't want to hear about cannabis. They're not interested in their candidates being out front on it. They don't even talk about it on their platforms much, and they try to kind of downplay it. And they allow candidates like Dianne Feinstein to come out against it, even though we legalized it. It's the Democratic Party is out of the establishment is so far out of step with its members. It's ridiculous.
Well, I saw Max did a video from the convention, and I watched it. It's very, very illuminating. Got a lot of good information. But it looks like you were there. I mean, you were the only non-corporate progressive on that ballot.
Yes.
You got 149 delegates essentially support 5%, which it may or may at this raw numbers it looks like it wouldn't have pushed anybody over the edge.
No, but it's amazing that you got 5%.
Yeah, but that you got. I mean, obviously there's some type of a progressive. I mean, you guys did enough work at that convention to get those votes. Yeah. So that's and why are you going to Central California as opposed to the cities where everybody else is going?
Excuse me. I go to Central. I go to North Country. I go all the way from Humboldt, all the way down through Shasta and Butte County, down Sacramento, down the Central Valley, Modesto, Bakersfield, Fresno, and then down to the deserts. And the reason I do that is because those are the people who they don't have a voice, and they'll tell you repeatedly, no one comes talks to them, no one listens to them,
and they vote.
Oh, and they vote.
Yeah, they vote. They totally vote.
They hear over and over and over. Well, why should we come out there? There's no money out there. There's no, we can't raise money out in Butte County. We can't raise money out in Modesto. So they don't see candidates, and they're frustrated. They're really angry. And the Democratic Party needs to understand that group. If you go down North Country, down the Central Valley, down in the desert, that was almost overwhelmingly Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary. And there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is because people out there are ready for something different and a new voice, and they're sick to death of the establishment of the Democratic Party.
Why are you running as a Democrat and not an independent?
I'm sorry. I've had a little bit of the flu the last few days. Sorry.
Uh-oh.
It's a killer. Watch out.
Yeah, why are you, stop that. Why are you running as a Democrat and not an independent?
In order to run, you actually have to raise even more money. It's a difficult thing in this state, with a state this large, to raise money to do a full campaign. But if you run as an independent, you now have an additional problem. When somebody sees independent and you're not advertising, they don't know what that means. They don't know if it means you're an independent and that you're really a Nazi, or if you're progressive. It just says independent. So
Right.
they don't know. And you have to have even more money to get your message out. And it's difficult enough in this state to run as a Democrat and raise the money. And as an independent, it would almost be 2 to 3 times that.
I mean, because there's a lot of people that are super scarred by the Democratic Party.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I got to tell you, that I'm one of them.
Yeah.
I was a very strong Democrat.
Did you vote for Bernie? Did you vote for Bernie in the primary?
Oh, yeah.
Just checking. I don't think I heard you on the record of that, but I know I know Max was a Bernie-crat, but I haven't. You did.
Back
you
in the 1990s, I used to watch Bernie on that old. You remember that old Bill Maher Politically Incorrect show? He was Bernie was on that. I liked him even back then.
Yeah.
But I do believe that as somebody who grew up in a Democratic Party that was actually progressive and actually accomplished things, and more than anything, a party that tried things. I mean, the Democratic Party, my God, in the 40s and the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, we tried things. If they didn't work, okay, but at least we tried them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, every time the Democratic Party basically says, oh, we can't do that. It's too expensive. We'll lose votes. It's a problem. We have become the most negative party of not being able to do anything of any party I've ever seen, and I'm sick of it.
You can't have Medicare for all.
No, you can't do that.
You can't have free public college.
No, of course
you
not.
You can't have cannabis as medicine.
So I'm assuming you wouldn't be rubber stamping just $800 billion increases to the Pentagon budget.
Oh yeah, let's talk about war.
Yeah,
that's one of the biggest parts of my platform is to cutting back on the Defense Department. And the amazing story, I tell a story in my stump speech, but in morning in the LA Times. Do you know that they are now at the Defense Department? They have so much money, they're not sure how they're going to be able to spend it all now. There's a whole article about they're desperately trying to figure out ways to, or else next year they won't get the same amount. They can't even spend it all. That's
how
crazy.
Cannabis.
Hey, maybe they could. Here's an idea. Maybe they could start like a secret black ops program to give everybody in the country Medicare for all.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Housing.
Just like
housing.
Backdoor spend whatever $20 billion it would take to do it, or college.
Yeah.
Maybe a black ops college.
Or
program.
housing, a black op home program.
Put it in that way. That way they can spend it.
Wow.
National security to me is more about the well-being of your people. Making sure your people do have health care, making sure your people actually have access to great medical technology, science. Those are the things that are real national security issues. But all we do is throw it, another $50 billion at a bomber against a Defense Department that can't even use it in wars that we don't even want to fight.
I find it hard to believe that the Pentagon is having trouble spending money. But I guess what was that Brewster's Millions? It's like you had to spend so much in a year or you lose it all.
That's right. That's right.
Well, at least they're doing audits now, right? Are they doing audits of the Pentagon now? Because they weren't doing them for a long time.
That's another interesting story, Dave. No one can audit the Defense Department. The Defense Department can only audit themselves. So in 2016, December 2016, it leaked. There was a whistleblower who leaked an audit the Defense Department had done, which showed, in fact, they had spent $125 billion over 5 years in administrative waste. They had wasted $125 billion, not on wars, not on weapons, but on actually administrative waste. $25 billion a year on waste in copy paper and pencils. And it is stunning, the actual I got to say it. It's just thievery what the Defense Department does in this country. It is.
How are you going to get along in Washington? You're so weird.
I don't want to get along. I tell people the funny thing is as much as I dislike Ted Cruz and everything he stands for, at least I understand where he's coming from, because he just pisses people off.
Yeah, he's weird
and
too.
But he gets things done.
They were able to do, I think, there's one of the lessons that Democrats don't seem to take, is they were able to do a lot to stop things and get their agenda, which is basically destroying what anything government can do. But, they were able to do that with a very small contingent of people that got elected, So if we can get a strong rabble-rouser voice elected into Congress, we might be able to throw the brakes on some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Even in this very crazy age. So, here's something, we didn't, you don't really, do you talk about Trump much? I don't think you really do you? You really are talking more about your issues, right? I mean, because the Democrats, every time Nancy Pelosi comes on camera, she's got an anti-Trump thing behind her, and it's like their only issue. They don't want to talk, but they're all corporate. They don't want to talk about any of these progressive things because they're all corporate.
Trump. That's it.
Because they're all corporate, so they won't talk about that. So, okay, I get it. But it's not going to be a winning strategy. He's going to win again. If they keep this nonsense up. And so you don't really talk about that in Trump country, because you're in Trump country.
Yeah.
Right?
I am to a certain degree, but even that's not the reason I don't talk about Trump. I don't talk about Trump because, as you said, it's a losing strategy. We keep going back and forth to this, Trump's terrible. Well, we figured that out about the second, or maybe the day he announced he was running.
Yeah, we knew that.
Down the escalator.
Yeah.
Now let's move forward with an actual plan
that
we're going to present to the public, with Medicare for all, with free college. Let's talk about things that we're actually going to do versus, well, we hate Trump. We're the I hate Trump party.
Yeah.
Well, that's not getting us anywhere. It's not going to. We've lost it once already, amazingly, and as you said, we're going to lose again if we keep doing it.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Right.
I just don't focus on him. I'm not interested in focusing on him. I'm interested in focusing on what we're going to do to make this a better country.
Yeah.
Any other questions in the chat there, Chella, coming through that you've seen?
Well, it's the general sentiment is, a very anti-democratic party situation, because once you become a Democrat, you become beholden to corporate interests. So let's play it through. Let's just say, hey, let's say you get in the top 2 and you're in the general against Feinstein, and let's say, hey, you win. How are you gonna maintain your progressive ideals when you have to take corporate money basically to stay alive?
As I tell people, I've made the pledge and I will keep the pledge, and you'll be able to see it every 3 months with the FEC filing. I will not raise one penny while I'm in office. I've been on the Hill. I worked there for about 2.5 years. I saw what politicians do with their days. Virtually every congressman there spends at least anywhere from 40 to 60% of their day raising money. I won't do that. If it comes down to it, I don't raise any money. Over 6 years, I don't mind going to the public and saying, look, here's what I've done. Here's what I've stood for. Here's what I believe in. Vote for me or don't vote for me based on what I believe in. But I'm not going to raise any money while I'm in office. That's going to be it, period. 0. You will see every 3 months a big 0 by my name, because that is why they sell out. Every single time they start compromising, it starts with a little compromise. Well, we'll take money because this is a good organization. This is a nice corporate organization. They're good guys. So I'll take that $5,000 from them, and then it becomes easier and easier. And pretty soon you're taking, the $5,000 from Pfizer and from Wells Fargo and from defense firms. The best thing to do is just to state right off the bat, there's no reason to raise money. Serve the people. It's 6 years, for God's sake. If you can't accomplish in 6 years, if you can't do something in that period of time, you don't need to be running for office anyway.
You get a decent salary.
So you're going to do it one term, huh? I love it.
No, I think, and you're quite honestly, that's right. They're looking for re-election. But if you stick to those ideals, you're going to get plenty of individual donations to keep it going without trying. I mean, you're not going to have to go to lunches with lobbyists because the people are going to support you.
Yeah.
To keep it going. So if you can get in and get 6 years under your belt, getting some of these issues through, the people are going to support you, and the money's going to come in again to re-election if you choose to run again. So I think that's a great position to take. A lot of corporate Dems are sort of taking that position. I don't know how long it's going to last. What? That's the one thing we've always noticed is that corporate Democrats always become progressive Democrats during election years.
Right.
And then as soon as they're back in office, they're no longer progressive.
Right.
So they always try to change their
like
ideas.
De Leon, for instance. I mean, De Leon has a lot of name recognition, and he's been in elected office in California a really long time. So really, you're running to beat him, so that you can then beat Feinstein.
Yeah, I've got to get past him, obviously. Right now, it's interesting because he's been in state office, but most people don't follow state politics, to be honest. And his name recognition, I think it's been jacked up since the convention, but his name recognition was really not that great before. It was about 9 to 10%, and he's probably jacked that up because he's been on a lot of television shows recently. But I tell people this, look, I can disagree with progressives on certain issues. I don't support the Delta tunnels. But I think you can make an argument and say you're still progressive. I don't support charter schools, but I understand there's an argument. I'm not going to say you're not progressive enough. But the one argument you cannot make is I'm taking corporate money and I'm a progressive.
Yeah.
That doesn't fit. It's the equivalent of saying I'm going to be a vegetarian, but I'm going to eat meat 5 times a week.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Are you a vegetarian, by the way?
I'm sorry?
Are you a vegetarian?
You're an animal lover.
I am a huge animal lover, and it is the big hypocrisy of my life that and it's the one thing I beat myself up on. I have cut back to where I eat meat about once a week, sometimes maybe twice, from being a total growing up on nothing but meat. But
Arkansas farm boy, essentially.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. But I have to admit because I am such an animal lover, I have to admit to a certain degree of hypocrisy that on occasion I do have.
Watch some of those documentaries like Oakjaw, or that's the movie Oakjaw, or what's
What the hell?
What the hell? I mean, yeah, you'll be a vegetarian.
Food Inc.
I've seen some of the videos.
If you convince the mind, it's easy.
Well, that's we have to convince the mind about this cannabis too, and I think this is an issue for 2018 and for 2020, and Kamala's going to might be running for president, so there might be another Senate seat. If for some reason you don't make it into the top 2, I wouldn't count yourself out in the future in the next couple of years. But I think, I'm really glad to see we have a champion of cannabis.
It's great to see a champion of cannabis. Yeah. I think, I love that you're progressive across the board and you're on board with all of the right, Wellstonian, Sanders, Warren-esque, things, all the right stuff. I mean, really all the right stuff. I mean, the only thing is that, you look like Joe Biden. I
know.
You're a white guy. You're a middle-aged white guy, and that's just, it's not what's happening right now.
I gotta tell you.
If you were can you be trans? Can you do?
Yeah, can we find a?
I was at a trans ball in Fresno. I went to the trans ball to support one of our supporters.
Okay.
In Fresno, and I got to tell you, I had so many of them come up to me and say, "We've never had anybody who was straight who actually came to this. Is there any way, because you are an old white guy, is there any way you can become a trans?" And I said, "Well, you guys will have to teach me. I don't know."
You gotta be true to what you are.
We are recovering white American men, Pat. We are, it's a new age.
I tell the old white guys at work who are bummed out about missing their opportunities to rise in life that I'm like, just embrace the old part. You're old. There's the old part of that. You can still, use your power for good. You still can. And you are. Using our power for good is all we can do. I mean, look, I'm a white woman. Apparently, I helped elect Donald Trump, even though I didn't help elect Donald Trump. But, I try to use my my powers for good and try to normalize cannabis use. I let people know that I use cannabis all the time, that my mom uses cannabis for medicine. She has my entire life. She used it for gallstones growing up. We use it for dementia treatment now. And I love that you are a champion of cannabis. Let's get it out there and let everybody know.
I will tell you this, and I will say this. I know that was nice of you to mention about 2020, but what I would like to do is, if this doesn't work out, I would like to try and do something to help, as you say, normalize cannabis use. I think I'm a good symbol for it because, nothing would be better to normalize cannabis in this country than an old, fat, bald, white guy.
Hi!
That's what we're all about here on
Look
this show.
at us. We're pretty normal.
We're about as far outside the demographic of a pot smoker, stoner as you get.
I think I would be a good person to help normalize it because.
Yeah. So do you use cannabis yourself?
I don't, which is what makes it additionally I think a very positive thing is I don't feel the need to. I'm just not somebody who likes smoke at all. And in terms of edibles, I've done edibles before, but I do that on occasion. But to me,
it's not your thing.
Really, it's not. And I don't drink alcohol very much. I rarely drink. I'm just not. I don't know.
You don't get headaches, so there you go.
Right, I don't. And I got to tell you, I think that's a good image for the cannabis industry. I think it would be a good thing.
I think it's great. I love it.
So let's talk about that a little bit, just to get to the issue of sort of, at least nationally, one of the conversations is about the opioid epidemic.
Yes,
and how cannabis is really everywhere it goes. It is helping in this issue. So tell us a little about what's your experience, what's your knowledge and your research about how cannabis is going to help us alleviate this problem.
Well, one of the things in my stump speech, the longer stump speech that I'll have to send to you, is I talk about the research that's come out of Colorado on a number of specific issues. It's truly amazing. One of them is opioid use, and we're seeing the decrease in opioid use, and it's almost contributed by law enforcement, contributes almost totally to people who are using cannabis to break away from the opioids and sort of use it to actually, it's a reverse gateway. That's what I love. It's the sort of the reverse gateway of getting it to come down. There's also the most fascinating statistic to me, though, I got to tell you. They are now saying in Colorado was down almost 25% in the last few months. 25% domestic violence. And law enforcement attributes that to cannabis because instead of men coming home and getting drunk and becoming angry, they're coming home and eating a brownie or smoking a joint, and they're mellowing out and they're not angry. And that's what they're contributing the drop in domestic violence to. That's pretty amazing when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. And I can back that up. My sister's a nurse in Colorado, like an emergency room nurse. She's in management now, and she backs that up. You are definitely seeing a decrease. You're seeing a decrease in even, they still have homeless in Boulder, Colorado, but you're seeing a decrease actually in the homeless population and drinking and violence among the homeless community because they are able to get cannabis. People can give them cannabis and so it's true. That is pretty amazing. It really touches so many areas of our lives as human beings and as Americans.
It would really transform society to get it off the Schedule 1. So really, what I'm hearing from you is that we need to send personal letters to our elected officials to try to sway them to see how great how cannabis can be.
I think we have to have. I'm still fairly new to this. Like I said, it's something that 2 years ago I picked up, as I mentioned, from my friend, and I'm still fairly new. But I really feel like that the shows like yours and people getting out and talking about it to normalize it, that's where we're lacking. I don't think letters are bad per se because hopefully they do read them. But, a letter it's not personal enough. We have to be on top of our politicians. We have to be in their faces about this. and we have to make sure they understand this. You just mentioned it. You said it. This is transformative. This has the potential to be transformative.
Mm-hmm.
And there's very few things you can say that about this country. There's very few things when you think about it, you can say, boy, if we could do this, this would transform so much of America in a positive way.
Yeah.
Cannabis, and we're not getting that message across. It's
Yeah.
not broad enough. We need people shouting from the rooftops because there's still, I mean, you guys know better than I do, but it's still an industry where people look at it and go, oh, that's the two guys down the basement smoking a joint.
Right.
That's how they view it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I love that you said that. That's great, because we also have another project about cannabis.
I mean, this has really, I mean, we've been, of course, users for many years, and of course, has been a part of Chella's family life. But, when Mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2010, it really, that became our focus, first of all.
Yeah.
And then it's doing the doing the investigation and the research, like what's going on in Israel. They use it in all their homes, and just finding out that it actually is pretty good for dementia. And there's big pharma wants a piece of this. It's true, but there's one pharmaceutical company that's actually doing research with micro doses of plant-based THC and Alzheimer's, and they're having amazing results.
If Big Pharma can get it to my mom, I'm happy for them to get it to my mom. I have no problem with that. But I don't want it to be the only avenue to get cannabis.
Right.
I think that, like, in a nursing home, you might need Big Pharma to put it into a pill form and make it so that they can take it. Because, it's not like my mom is super compliant.
Yeah, it's a botanical, it's tough. They don't know what to do. They're all crazy. The FDA is like, what do we do? What do we do?
Yeah, and that's a huge problem.
Yeah.
That's a huge problem, because what you've got are so many drug companies, and not just drug companies, but so many of the scientists and researchers can't do the work that we need to be done on cannabis.
Right.
Because it's illegal.
It's on the Schedule 1.
I really, I'm that's kind of a straw man argument. That's part of the talking points. There's 25,000 pages of accredited research out there.
Sure.
In the United States.
25 more, though.
Yeah.
Plus more from Israel.
And plus from all over the world. We need,
But you're right.
more research.
We got to get it off the Schedule 1. It's true.
Well, now, what are the ramifications? Canada's run into some issues here, because they're about to legalize, and they're going to be breaking 3 UN treaties doing it. So they either have to not legalize it, withdraw from those treaties, because basically international drug policy is based on United States drug policy. Mm-hmm. And if we take it off of Schedule 1, other countries are, like Paraguay is basically violating international law by doing what they're doing by legalizing all of their drugs.
Uruguay,
rather. And Canada looks like it may be doing that with cannabis. So what do you think? If we actually deschedule cannabis on a federal level,
I'm sorry, you cut out there. I'm sorry, Dave. What was the last?
I'm just saying, if we deschedule cannabis on a federal level, what are the implications internationally? We're going to get into trouble with the UN. That might be a reason why it's not going to happen.
No, we're not going to get into trouble. The rest of the country, the rest of the world. I still believe, despite what's happened with the election of Donald Trump, the rest of the world follows the United States in terms of things like this, and most of the world's ahead of us actually on this. But you're not gonna see any international problems at all. The countries that we deal with, we almost always provide them in terms of aid and in terms of economics than they provide us. Nobody has ever been able to tell the United States what we want. We're gonna back off you. The only country that's ever been successful at that is pretty much Turkey, because Turkey has the air bases there, and Turkey has the ability to threaten the U.S. that they'll close the air bases in the Middle East, and so Turkey can kind of get away with some stuff. But the other countries, they're not going to fight the U.S. on it.
Well, we've always ignored the General Assembly or anything else that they do anyway. So
that's true.
So we're just going, meh, whatever.
Whatever.
And that's essentially what some of the other guys are doing too. So it's probably not that big of a. And even conservatives, they're like, "Well, UN schmooan, who cares? We're going to do whatever we want." Well, that's good. That's great. Well, this has been great. This has been an awesome. We usually go over the week's news in cannabis, and there's been a couple of things this week that caught our eye. we've tried to, because I think this is part of what normalization and mainstreaming is. The local news is one of the most trusted news sources, not the big cable newses, but your local channels are very trusted by local people when they're watching, so to see stories that they're talking about in their towns about cannabis and the legalization process, whether it's medicinally or recreational, we like to focus on that and talk about what's going on. I'll tell you what, I tell you who got a dose of cannabis this week was Fox and Friends was talking to that guy in Illinois, the guy, Thomas Benjamin Wolf. And here's another interesting character. You're talking about, Pat, you're a good face for this cause. I agree. And here's another one. He's a former FBI agent who didn't, State Department official, national security official, worked with George W. Bush, Condoleezza Rice, the list of people you would not expect
credentials.
You would not expect to be on board cannabis.
Yeah.
Didn't do it when he was in the FBI because he couldn't.
Yeah.
Didn't do it until he was out a few years ago. And it's literally, he says in this interview.
He's also new to cannabis.
He's new to cannabis. He literally says it transformed his life.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And now it is
opened his mind.
He'd opened his mind. He does it as an act of civil disobedience because they came back the next day and somebody said, "Hey, you could be arrested for doing what you're doing." And he's like, "Well, I consider it. He doesn't do it every day, but it's part of his routine, and he considers an act of civil disobedience, and he'll continue to do it after he gets elected." And cannabis is on the ballot in Illinois. Cannabis is on the ballot in Indiana.
And there's a cannabis candidate in
Indiana. We are seeing success.
How many states is cannabis on the ballot this time in 2018?
Good question. There's a bunch. Recreational is on. I don't have a number. It's on. I follow this guy, Tom Engel, Marijuana Moment. He's got a great tracking place with all the legislation. And it's hard to keep up because whether it's CBDs in Tennessee or CBD in Tennessee or Kentucky, or some of these other more conservative states, or full recreational in New Jersey or Vermont, which is did through a legislative action, first state ever. So we have hit a tipping point, and I think whether or not you've got I think some of these candidates are doing this for political reasons. I don't get that vibe from you. I think you have your finger on the pulse of what's happening.
And well, you have a loved one. That's the tipping. That's the real difference. Is when you have a loved one who benefits from cannabis, on a visceral level what's up.
That's right. And then you add to that the tax benefit.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I've actually now got mother-in-law was diagnosed about 2 years ago with melanoma. Melanoma. And he's been in the same situation where the greatest thing for him has been cannabis use. I talk to him. I go see him. He's actually up in Toronto, where my wife's from. But I go up and see him, and he'll sit there and tell you stories about going through chemo and that cannabis was the only thing that really could actually do anything for him, to relieve the pain, to be able to let him even to walk or do anything. So yeah, it's very personal for me. But I got to tell you, to be honest, I just look at it and think, the more I've learned about it, this is just ridiculous. I mean, we are. When you say people are political, this isn't political. This is just stupidity.
Yeah. Well, you see the lives that have been ruined also.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, being in the criminal justice system, I've actually had to do federal cases where, we were talking mandatory minimums, where guys are looking at 10 to 15 years with no other choice. I mean, there wasn't, the judge couldn't, even if they wanted to, sentence them for less than that. Now, there are things that we kind of could work the system a little bit, but you did see people, growers, you saw sellers going to prison for 15, 20, 25 years, and they're still there in a lot of cases. It's a real, this is a real issue that I honestly believe, I'm obviously, you've seen my platform. I believe very strongly in Medicare for all. I believe very strongly in cutting the defense budget. I believe very strongly in terms of environmentally trying to get this country 100% renewable by 2050. But the issue that is least talked about, and this is what I say in my stump speech, that would have probably the most absolute of Medicare for all is the legalization of cannabis and the ability to actually be able to market it for what it's good for the possibilities, to be able to mainstream it, normalize it. As I mentioned earlier, and I think you guys have said as well, probably, we're talking about a plant that in 20 to 25 years will be aspirin. It'll be Advil. It'll be whatever.
Yeah.
And the longer we hold off on this, it's just, that's my soapbox.
Very good. Excellent.
I love it.
Well, that was
Bravo.
bravo. I'm going. We should have looked harder, but now we've got it on. DC 420 LA. And we'll chop this up a little bit into some video and put it up on the station. But this has been great. I agree with you. It's crazy. It's crazy that we're doing this to people. It's crazy we're doing this to kids. That we're doing this to people of color. That we're doing this to veterans, that we're not allowing them access.
Old people. It's everybody that says that they're for, the Democrats are for social justice, the conservatives are for the veterans, everybody's for states' rights.
Yeah. Right. So there you go. and yet they just they can't get past the lies that our government's been telling us for years.
This is the issue of this election cycle. Paint your bus green.
I think so. I mean, they were.
I'm telling you, paint it green so everybody knows exactly where you stand. Don't hide from it. Don't shrink from it. Because De Leon did, and he will. And if you really want to get your name out there and be unashamed.
We are a larger demographic than gay marriage was. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Everybody
very
smokes
small
weed.
Population. It's a far, pretty much everybody smokes weed, and it's because of the benefits, because of all of everything that it does. We can change things with this. Yeah. I guess this sort of micro issue in a larger community. If we can just get more people.
It's true.
To open up about it and to talk about it with their friends. Even in Hollywood where we work, it's still above the line. It's like no problem.
Well,
for the most part, but below the line, it's still if the workers
huge problem.
The workers know you smoke weed. They make fun of you, blah 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 blah. But they'll go home and pound an 18 pack while they're watching the game. No problem.
Yeah, no problem.
Did you get hammered this weekend? Oh yeah, it was great.
Yep.
But. Oh, did you get high this weekend? Yes, as a matter of fact, I did. It was awesome,
Yeah.
So, that's what we're trying to do on this show. I really appreciate that you're making this an issue. You realize that this is you're not making an issue. You realize that this is the issue that is going to change a lot of things for this country, on top of all the other progressive, issues that are going to take care of things. So, really appreciate you coming on the show, talking about this topic. And where can people go to, what's your website? Where can people follow you? Events, something coming up? What can you tell us?
Yeah, you can go to Pat Harris for FOR Senate.com. That's the website address. And realistically, there's a calendar up. Although I think we have to tomorrow. We're actually going to work on the calendar because we go everywhere. We're all over the place, and I don't think it's been updated. Week. So you can look at the calendar. You can also, I don't take corporate donations. So I depend on individuals. I depend on people to donate. I had a donation for $1 yesterday.
Nice.
And I appreciate it. People donate $50, $100, whatever they can do, whatever they can afford. And that's really appreciated because it does make it for me to be able to go out and tell people, look, you don't need to take corporate donations. And I honestly believe of all the things Bernie Sanders accomplished, the single biggest thing he accomplished in 2016 was he didn't need to go to Wall Street to get money. That the people would fund it if they found somebody they could believe in. And we've got to keep that up. We've got to show the Democratic Party. We've got to show this country you do not have to go to Wall Street to fund these campaigns.
Well, we're looking. We'll be watching for the numbers coming out of the FEC filing for this first quarter. You understand you're looking at about $90 average donations, so that's pretty good. I think if we can get your message out and what our small little silly blog can do for you.
Yes,
we will do what we can.
Not blog at all. It's an important blog. It's important to have people who are willing to talk about mainstream, especially people who are people can look at and say, I mean, when you're sitting there talking about your mother and they can hear stories about that, that's what we've got to do.
Well, we try. We try. We've got an Alzheimer's pot dramedy also brewing. So
yes, we've got a screenplay.
We'll touch with that.
It looks like it might be a teleplay now. I don't know. But,
it's a series for sure.
It's consumed. The whole thing has consumed our lives, and it's quite frankly, I ain't got time to worry about Donald Trump. I really don't.
No. I have to go to my mom's nursing home every day because they don't check her diaper often enough, and now she has diaper rash.
Yeah.
Wow.
On top of being super nervous all day long and her feet shaking and her eyes being crusty. And we, taxpayers, pay $10,000 a month to the facility. My mom pays $1,000 a month to the facility for $11,000 a month, and she has to be nervous all day. And they're holding me hostage and saying, oh, we can give her more medicine, but you have to put her in hospice. And it has to be one of the hospices that is owned by the same corporation that owns the nursing home.
Oh, one of each. We had a choice of 2 hospices, but they're both owned by the same corporation.
The corruption
that's owned by the nursing home
of elder care in our society is just shameful.
Well, that's a whole nother topic.
That's another show.
Yeah,
that's what we have time for. We have time.
Guys, let me come on though. I really do. I just want to let you know how much I appreciate you letting me talk about it.
Thank you for running.
Close to my heart, and I just, I don't get to talk about just this issue enough, and it's really refreshing for me to be able to talk about it. So thank you.
That's great. Well,
Sweet.
We'll be watching your candidacy.
Yeah.
We've had some other interest from some of the other progressives to come on and talk about cannabis too. So we're probably going to bring them on. I hope this starts this conversation. The fact that you're out there and you and a couple other candidates around the country that are going out there that recognize this is what's happening and we need to get on board. And we're gonna. It's like Bernie Sanders was making people more progressive. Let's get more people on board this topic. And we thank you for doing it. And we're gonna keep track of your news and your events.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll see you out there in the.
Come back again if you
come
like.
back again. Maybe we'll come out over to the studio.
Yeah.
We'll come out and visit in Studio City. We lived out there. We'll enjoy some jazz music and get together sometime. We're Angelinos. We've lived here our whole lives. So and I don't know what it is. It's like progressive politics gets us social. So. I think
there you go. That's right. Yeah, there you go.
Well,
I'd love to, and I do appreciate it again, guys. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you so much, Pat. You can certainly stay in the hangout. We're going to play some. We're going to take a little break, do a little change up of the camera situation here, and then we're going to play some news stories that we caught this week.
And then talk about them on the back end.
And talk about them on the back end. But thanks everybody for watching. We've been talking to Pat Harris, progressive Democrat running here in California for the United States Senate. He's running against Dianne Feinstein in her bid for her 6th term as senator here in California. He's a progressive that is a champion of cannabis.
And on the ballot.
Progressive
on the ballot.
What's up, Reefer Revolutionaries? DC here. Be sure to join us live on Sundays at 4:20 Pacific for DC 420 LA, The Week in Weed, the show where we spark up and talk about marijuana in the mainstream media, the politics of pot, and cannabis cures. That's DC 420 LA on YouTube. Follow the channel link and get notifications for when we go live. And now you can watch live on Steam It through DLive at DC 420 LA. And on Weed TV, the Cannabis Media Network. See you Sunday. Pot for peace.